Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Today I would like to talk about this Korean candy style cabinet that I recently picked up and did a mild restoration on. As you can imagine, this is not quite up to the standard of a traditional Japanese candy cab made by Taito or Sega. This is mostly wood with a bit of metal in the front where you can see the two doors, and then the rest is plastic bezels, but it's mostly wood. What I find interesting about this cab is that they really haven't tried to copy what the Japanese did. Maybe on a high level concept, the sizing and the angles, something like that. But really, they did their own thing. And some for worse, some for the better. So we'll have a look at some of the details. The restoration that I did was exclusively to the internals. To me, the functionality and safety were the key priorities of the restoration. So I redid the electrical wiring. I did some changes to the control panel, to the marquee light, the speakers, the monitor, the power supply. But really the exterior appearance, to me, it doesn't bother me that much. When I bought it, I made sure that the plastic parts were not yellowed, but when it comes to the sides being scuffed, or you can even see here that it had some repair where the main body and the control panel parts would have been cracked and somebody put some kind of metal plating there, and there's a bit of vinyl. But you know, the sides don't bother me that much. I will make sure that the sides are not visible when I put it with the other arcade machines. Okay, so for the control panel, you can see that this is quite different from your usual candy cab, Japanese candy cab. This is a fully plastic control panel, and it has this neat little angle. I actually really like this. Now, the disadvantage of this is that it only fits a certain type of joysticks and buttons. This is only 28 millimeters, and as you can see, with the hole, sure, you could fit one of those classic long screw-in buttons, but you wouldn't be able to fit Sanwa buttons, and it would have to be 28 anyway. The original joysticks were crown joysticks. I don't know if they were very old or it's just how they were, but they were extremely loose. The throw distance was very high, so I didn't like them at all. So I made a 3D printed bracket to be able to fit Sanwa JLWs. They're very strong. Takes a lot of force to engage, but they're also very precise and very neat. It's an acquired taste, but I do prefer them over JLFs when it comes to shmups and platformers. It's a little bit short, but it's okay. The stem is longer than on JLFs. JLFs were really dwarfish, and I tried with an extender and it wasn't nice. It just changes the whole feel. The buttons are okay. They know Sanwas, but they're not bad. And I redid the wiring to be able to do a quick disconnect. I might get some housings there, but it's using these breakout boards in DB25. It's only 3 buttons wired now because I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with the extra 3. I'm gonna use a kick harness or MC Cthulhu or a JPEG. I'm not sure quite yet. The coin mech seems to work. I haven't tried with Korean coins, but at least the switch here is wired. And while I'm here, I wanted to show, this is completely redone. As you can see, this is the main power switch. It's pretty handy that it's there. For commercial use, you know, it's kind of questionable whether you would allow your users to be able to turn on and off the cab so easily. But when it arrived, it only had 2 poles, and those terminals were exposed, which I find completely insane, because that means that at least even when the cab is off, 1 of the 2 terminals is live mains 240 volts. So you know, if you forgot to log this in and somebody's just doing, you know, regular maintenance on the joysticks and buttons here, if they touch this, they'll get zapped to 240 volts. So I swapped it with a 4-pole switch, and I've added some insulation. The front is made out of metal, but most of the cab is made out of wood. Now, if we look inside, I've got an MVS running at the moment, and this is the original power supply. Now, with the original power supply, this transformer on it is just talking about DC voltages out, and then you have this little PCB with a pot for 5 volts and a couple of caps and ICs. But although it doesn't say anywhere, it's actually also a step down for the transformer. There's no writings that indicate that, but there's a plug here on the side, and this plug here outputs 110 volts out and isolated for the original monitor. This is 240 volts in and outputs 110 for the monitor. When I got this, I plugged in this Polo MVS here and I measured the voltage, and I was at 7.6 volts. So I don't know if it's just the caps that need changing or something else that failed on the power supply, but I didn't feel like it was worth investing time in this. I just replaced it with an old trusty RT85A meanwhile, and I'm dead set on 5 volts, and it's I'm just happy to do it that way. So I've rewired the whole JAMA harness to use this one for -5, 12 and 5 volts. When I got the cab, believe it or not, this was a gaping hole. They actually had a hardwire power cord, European style or Korean style is the same as European. No fuses. Well, there is a fuse on that power supply, but that's it. And it was just a gaping hole with a cord that was that had some strain relief in the wood inside the cab. So I've designed this little plate of 3D printing and I'm using a leftover EMI filter and a 4 amp fuse. I'll show you from the other side. And that goes to the front switch, the 4-pole switch in the control panel, and then comes back to this power strip here with the TV. That's 5 volts for this little dongle here, and then the white cable is to the meanwhile PSU. For the monitor, I had a burn-free tube which turned on. Unfortunately, it was very dark and very, I don't know how to say, overly saturated. So every time I would turn on anything that would affect the brightness or contrast, gain, anything like that, screen voltage, anything like that would result in a very oversaturated picture. I've tested the tube with a rejuvenator and the life is really good, so it must be a chassis issue. I've recapped all the electrolytics and the issue remained. So look, I'm kind of fed up with RK chassis, to be honest, and even if I get it nice, it will never be as nice as a, you know, this is my favorite, those Löwe Grundig Philips A68 ESF tubes. I find them absolutely fantastic. They are super sharp. They have deep blacks, great geometry, great purity, you know, those molded yokes, great convergence. Geometry is obviously the chassis, sorry, but I mean the purity and the convergence set at the factory in the yoke. And so I used a Grundig TV with SCART, and to get JAMA working, I've designed this little dongle using the very common THS 7374 circuit, JAMA RGB to SCART RGB circuit. I just copied the circuit in the datasheet, and that's been used in super guns and made it into a small footprint dongle that doesn't need any mounting, doesn't need any cables, just straight into SCART, and then 5 volts that can be USB, that can be straight to the power supply, up to you, and just a 3.96 pitch connector just like a K7000, for RGB from your JAMA harness, and then a couple of pots here to attenuate depending on boards. And that displays JAMA, as you've seen the MVS running on with a metal slug. All the controls, so this TV had 3 boards on the front of the case. One for power, one for the AV, and the infrared sensor, as well as headphones. And this was just the button board, so I just put that on a piece of wood and mounted it there, so I can still use the remote from the front of the cab. And yeah, a big advantage of this cab, it's all wood, so it's very easy to mount anything on it. To mount the chassis, I used some leftover chassis rail from a TV that I stripped out. It wasn't from that particular TV, but it was from probably another Grundig or something like that. That wasn't working. So I tend to keep a lot of parts that I may use in the future. And so this is great because I can just slide out the chassis. I just need to find a way to secure it, but yeah. The last bit I want to show is the marquee. So it didn't turn on when I got it, and it had this CFL type of screw-in light bulb that wasn't working, and I replaced it with something similar. I don't know the wattage of the original. I initially put an 11 watt warm white, and that was just too yellow and a little bit too dim. Now I've put a 23 watt cool white, but I think that's a bit overkill. I think in a dim setting it will be too bright, so I'm still gonna play with different wattage. And if I need something more diffuse, because you can kind of see a hot spot in the middle, maybe not in the video, but it's hot here, so I may need to diffuse the light a little bit more. I could put some diffused LEDs. I don't know, I'll see once it's inside in the definitive setting that I will use it in. That's for the light. And the speakers, these are the original speakers, so they can't read the brand, but they're 20 watts, 8 ohm. I'm not sure they're really 20 watts. They sound okay, it's nothing great. They only had 2 screws on each speaker. And because the original TV speakers from the Grundig were 8 ohms, I decided to hardwire them straight to the TV, so I still can use the amplifier. Usually what I do with this sort of restoration mod is that I use a 2.1 PC speaker set, because I think that they're just awesome. They have everything that you need built in, including a remote, including sub volume and headphone jacks if you want to play at night. They're really good, but in this case, because I already had that, I did that. It's lacking a bit of bass. Obviously, it's not going to have a subwoofer, but it works well for now, and it's truly stereo. The MVS board is modded for stereo line out, so that's what I'm using at the moment, and it sounds great. The last thing I want to show is this pretty cool feature where you can see it has a hatch for the monitor. The older Japanese style used to have that, and some of the Taito as well, but all the modern Sega, the later 90s Segas don't have that, so I'm pretty stoked to have that feature. Okay, so that concludes the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.